I raised him with these hands, held him when he was scared, skipped meals so he wouldn't go hungry. And yet with one whisper from his wife, he turned and punched me in the face, without blinking. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and knew the son I once knew was gone. If you think this is just another family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now so you never miss the next shocking episode from us. Clara Monroe sat on the edge of her bed, back straight as a metronome. The strings of her old violin resting on the nightstand hadn't been tuned in years yet. The way she stared at it, one might think a concert was moments away. Outside, the New York twilight pressed its heavy orange glow against the window pane, and shadows stretched across the parquet floor like slow fingers. In this apartment, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, rent-controlled since 1979, Clara had spent the last 46 years of her life. It had held the music of her marriage, the silence of widowhood, and now only the whisper of memories, too delicate to touch. The doorbell rang sharp and abrupt, breaking the fragile quiet. She didn't move. It rang again, longer this time. A pause, then a knock. 3 soft thuds like someone who wasn't sure if they were welcome. Clara smoothed the wrinkles from her burgundy sweater and opened the door. "Hi, Mom," her daughter said, smiling without warmth. Lena Monroe was 45, dressed in crisp beige slacks and a powder blue blouse that matched her eyes exactly. She carried a canvas tote and an envelope one Clara recognized as official just by its thickness. Behind Lena stood the hallway full of faint echoes, smells of other people's dinners, and the ticking hallway clock that had marked time on this floor for decades. "You're early," Clara said. "I know. I wanted to talk before the movers get here." Clara's stomach clenched. She looked past Lena as if hoping anyone else might appear instead. "Come in then," she said, not warmly, not coldly, just properly. They sat opposite each other in the living room. Lena on the leather armchair, Clara on the edge of the floral love seat where James used to read his morning papers. There was a framed photo on the side table, Clara in her prime, in black concert attire, bow lifted, face alight, with a passion long retired. Lena glanced at it, then looked away. "So," Clara said after a long silence, "let's get on with it. You know this is what's best." Lena said, her voice low but firm, the voice of someone trying to control both emotion and outcome. "You've been alone too long. You don't cook, you don't go out, you barely answer the phone. I answer when it's worth answering. It's not safe anymore. You left the stove on last week. I turned it off eventually." Lena sighed. "We've talked about this. You're 70, Mom. You can't keep living like this. The building doesn't have an elevator, you barely see a doctor, and you haven't touched your violin in over a year." Clara's lips pressed into a hard line. She reached for the cup of cold tea on the coffee table and sipped it, then winced. It had gone bitter. "I'm not a child," she said. "No, but you're not 25 either. And it's not like I'm sending you away to prison. It's a good place, clean, safe, people your age. Vegetables? What? People my age, they don't talk, they stare out windows and watch game shows until they die." Lena exhaled sharply and reached into the envelope. She pulled out a pamphlet with glossy images, happy seniors laughing over crafts, playing bingo, clinking glasses of apple juice. In the center, Rose Hill Haven, where golden years shine. Clara stared at the pamphlet like it was written in another language. "I don't want this," she said. "I know, but you need it." The movers came just after sunset. 2 young men with backward caps and polite smiles began dismantling her world. The shelves emptied. Her husband's record player, the couch they'd bought in '82, the stack of sheet music under her bed, all gone in a rhythm that felt too fast for the gravity of what was happening. Clara said nothing. She sat in her faded chair by the window, her hands folded, her eyes following the violin as it was wrapped in a wool blanket and packed into a box labeled "Fragile." She didn't speak when the movers gently urged her up so they could take the chair. She stood and let them move her like another object. An hour later, Clara stood in the entrance of Rose Hill Haven. The doors hissed open automatically. A young woman with bright lipstick and tired eyes greeted them with a practiced smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Monroe. We're so glad you're joining our community. Let me show you your room." Clara followed without responding. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and lavender-scented air freshener. The walls were lined with cheerful prints of sunflowers and lighthouses. A man in a wheelchair blinked at her as they passed. Another woman sat in a rocking chair by the window, watching nothing. Her room was small. A single bed, a dresser, one chair by the window that overlooked a narrow courtyard with dying petunias. Lena stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of what to say. She tried anyway. "You'll be okay here, Mom. They have music nights, gardening clubs. There's even a piano downstairs." Clara said nothing. She moved to the window and looked out. Lena hesitated, then said goodbye. Clara didn't turn around. That night, sleep refused her. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was too quiet in the wrong way. Her apartment had creaked with life radiators, pigeons, neighbors. Here the silence was dead, manufactured, padded. At 2:37 a.m. she sat up. Something tugged at her attention. A sound, faint, fumbling, melancholy. She slipped her feet into slippers and padded toward the door, cracking it open. The hallway lights buzzed overhead. Nothing. No one. She turned to close the door, and there it was again. Piano, barely audible, halting, as if someone with trembling fingers was searching for a melody they had almost forgotten. It was coming from below. Clara frowned. There was no floor below this one, was there? She stepped into the hallway and followed the sound. Past the nurse's station, past the closed doors with nameplates etched in brass. It grew clearer, still soft, but fuller now, more sure of itself. A minor key, a waltz maybe, or a requiem. She reached a door marked storage. It was locked, but just beside it a ventilation grate trembled ever so slightly with each note. She knelt, pressed her ear to the cool metal. There it was, piano, live, not recorded, human. Someone was playing. And not badly either, though the tempo fluctuated wildly and the chords landed too hard. But there was emotion, desperation even, the kind of playing that didn't ask to be heard but needed to be. Clara stood slowly. Her heart beat faster than it had in months. Not from fear, from recognition. Whoever was playing that piano wasn't playing it for show. They were playing it to stay alive. She walked back to her room slower this time. The sound followed her, faint but stubborn, like a ghost dragging chains through a familiar home. Back in bed, she closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time her fingers twitched for the strings. The next morning, Clara sat in the dining room of Rose Hill Haven, picking at scrambled eggs that looked more like yellow foam than food. Around her, residents sat silently in rows of beige chairs hunched over their plates. A flat-screen TV mounted on the far wall played a morning show at low volume, two anchors, laughing about some dog riding a skateboard. Clara didn't laugh. She turned to the nurse, making rounds, and lifted a hand halfway. "Excuse me," she said. The nurse, a stocky woman with red scrubs and too much perfume, stopped. "Yes, Mrs. Monroe." Clara hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Is there a basement level in this building?" The nurse raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask?" Clara shrugged. "I thought I heard something last night. Music. A piano." The nurse's face changed. A flicker of something, nervousness maybe, or just plain weariness. "You probably heard the TV in the lounge. Sometimes they forget to turn it off." "No," Clara said. "It wasn't a TV. It was live." The nurse straightened, her smile stiffening. "There's no one playing piano here at night. That part of the building's closed off. Unsafe." "Which part?" A pause. "The sub-basement. Old storage area. It's been sealed for years." "Sealed but not silent," Clara said under her breath. The nurse shifted her weight. "They say it's haunted. You know old buildings, funny sounds, pipes, wind." Clara squinted at her. "Haunted. Just something the night staff says. It's probably just the plumbing." She patted Clara's shoulder like she was petting a cat. "Don't worry yourself. Happens a lot with new residents." Clara watched her walk away, her head filled not with fear but with curiosity. That night Clara didn't sleep. She lay awake, waiting, ears tuned like radar. At 2:14 a.m. the sound returned, softer than the night before but unmistakable. A melody fragmented, disjointed, like someone trying to remember how to feel. She rose quietly, slid into her slippers, and wrapped her shawl tight around her shoulders. The hallway outside was deserted, lit in pools of dull yellow. Cameras sat in the corners like watchful eyes, but Clara knew the blind spots already. She had spent the day mapping them. She moved with care, staying close to the walls, avoiding creaky tiles. At the end of the hallway, she reached the door marked storage, locked. But to the left, a narrow hallway veered into staff access. It wasn't on any resident map she'd seen, but she'd noticed the janitor enter it earlier, keys jingling, muttering to himself. She followed the hallway down past a utility closet, past 2 vending machines humming in the dark. Then there it was, an old stairwell door half concealed behind a folding partition. No sign, no lock. Clara hesitated for only a breath before pulling it open. The smell hit her first, damp, metallic, and ancient, like wet bricks and forgotten iron. She took the steps slowly, her hand gripping the railing, her body alert with adrenaline. The light grew dimmer as she descended, and by the time she reached the last step, the only illumination came from a cracked emergency light pulsing weakly in the ceiling. The basement stretched before her in a maze of low ceilings, broken shelving, and sagging pipes. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, mold clung to the corners like black veins. But the sound was louder now. Piano. Rough, determined. Clara followed it. Through the corridor, past rusted filing cabinets and stacks of discarded bed frames, she moved like a ghost herself. The music led her to a double door, its paint peeling like dead skin. One door was slightly ajar. She nudged it open and stepped inside. What she saw stopped her breath. In the center of the room, surrounded by dusty boxes, a toppled gurney, and a cracked mirror, was a grand piano, or what was left of it. The wood was faded, the lid permanently propped open, one leg bolstered by cinder blocks. The keys were mismatched, some yellowed with age, others missing entirely. Seated at the piano, back turned, was a boy. He was no more than 17. Black hoodie, pulled tight jeans torn at the knees. His fingers moved with urgency, but not finesse. He struck the keys like he was trying to force the music out of them, like each note was a plea. Clara stood perfectly still. The boy kept playing, then sensing something, he froze. He turned. Their eyes locked. Time stopped. He was black, thin face, sharp with hunger and fear. His eyes wide and alive scanned her like a cornered animal. One hand slid off the keys and disappeared into his hoodie. Clara didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She simply took a small step back, slowly raised both hands in peace. The boy didn't move. They stood like that for several long seconds, the air thick with the unsaid. Clara could see it in his face, the calculation. Was she a threat? Would she scream? Call security? She didn't. She just stared at him, not with pity, not with fear, with recognition. She saw the way his left hand twitched near his pocket, ready. His eyes were rimmed with sleeplessness. He looked like someone who hadn't exhaled in weeks. She lowered her hands, whispered, "It's okay." He blinked. "I heard your music," she said, barely above a murmur. "Last night." Still he said nothing. "I used to play," she added, "violin, with the New York Symphony." The boy's brows furrowed, disbelief, confusion. Clara glanced at the piano. "She's in rough shape," she said, nodding. "But she still sings." The boy's mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. Clara took another step back toward the door. "I won't say anything," she said gently. "I was never here." Then, with her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear herself, she turned and walked out, back through the hallway, up the stairs, into the corridors of the living. She didn't stop until she was inside her room again, door shut back, pressed against it. Her hands were shaking. She had seen ghosts before, of memory, of music, of time, but this was no ghost. This was flesh and blood, fear and fire. A boy hiding in the cracks of a system that forgot how to care. And he played the piano like he was trying to remember what it meant to be human. Clara sat on her bed. She thought of the music that had haunted her. Now she knew its face. And it had looked back. Clara waited until the hallway was empty. She stood just outside the staff break room, a paper napkin folded in one hand, and inside it a simple sandwich. White bread, peanut butter, no jelly. Alongside it a plastic bottle of water she had slipped from the community fridge, replacing it with one she brought from her room. No one would notice. No one ever noticed anything around here as long as it didn't threaten the schedule or their liability insurance. She walked slowly toward the stairwell at the end of the west wing, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm beneath her sweater. She didn't go all the way down, just halfway, the fourth step above the basement landing. She bent down carefully, placed the sandwich and the water bottle on the concrete ledge where a missing chunk of railing left space. She paused, listening. Silence. Not a note of piano, not a breath of movement. Good, she thought. Let him find it. Let it be his choice. She turned and walked back upstairs, more alert than before, her senses sharpened by the odd adrenaline of the act. Smuggling kindness, that's what it felt like. And maybe that was the right kind of crime. The next morning, the sandwich was gone. The water bottle, too. That night, she left a hard-boiled egg and 2 granola bars. They vanished. The third night, she found something waiting in their place. A crumpled napkin, and written on it in tight handwriting, 4 words. "Why are you helping?" Clara stared at the note for a long time. She didn't write back. Instead, the next night, she returned with the same supplies and a cassette tape. Not a modern one, but an old-school TDK labeled in fading Sharpie ink Ravel, Piano Concerto in G major, Clara solo. She left it next to the sandwich like an offering. 2 days passed. Nothing. Then on the third night, the piano returned. Not a song this time, but scales. Careful, methodical climbing and falling, broken up by chords that missed the root pauses that stretched too long. Someone was practicing, learning. Clara stood near the vent grate, not too close, just near enough to hear. She didn't want to be seen. Not yet. This wasn't hers to own, not her tempo to control. But that boy, whoever he was, had listened to the tape. She could feel it in his touch, the phrasing, the shifts in pressure. He had internalized it even if he didn't understand what he was doing. The music had reached him, and that was enough. Days went by. The staff continued their routines with lazy indifference. Medication carts rolled. Bored therapists droned on in bingo nights and chair yoga. Clara moved among them like a wisp, polite, quiet, unreadable. She declined activities. She nodded during health checks, and each night she left food. Sometimes a note, sometimes a question, but never a demand. He responded one night with a drawing graphite on notebook paper folded tight. A sketch of a piano viewed from above with small arrows and markings. It wasn't artistic, not precise, but it was intense, focused. He was diagramming the chords he couldn't reach, the movement he didn't understand. The next night, Clara left a worn copy of a beginner's music theory book. She circled sections in red pen. Circle of fifths, minor progressions, dissonance as texture. Still they hadn't spoken. Not since the night they saw each other, until one night she stayed. Just one step closer. She didn't knock, she didn't call out. She simply let the tip of her shoe touch the basement floor. And she waited. No piano tonight, only stillness. Then, "Why are you really helping me?" a voice said from the shadows. Young, guarded, but clearer than she expected. Clara looked toward the darkness. "Because music should never be wasted." A pause. "I didn't ask to be here," the voice said. "Neither did I." Silence again, then movement. From behind a broken support beam, the boy emerged. He wore a different hoodie, now darker, and his eyes looked bruised with fatigue. His hands were stuffed deep into his sleeves. His jaw clenched like someone used to keeping secrets in his teeth. "You don't even know me," he said. Clara nodded. "That's true. I could be anyone." "I doubt that." He narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" She stepped a bit closer. "You play like someone trying to find his way back to something. Not forward. Back." He blinked, looked away. "I'm not playing for anyone," he muttered. "I know," she said softly. "That's why it matters." A long breath escaped him. He looked down at the floor, then back up at her. "My name's Malik." Clara nodded again. "Clara." They didn't shake hands, they didn't move. Malik sat on the piano bench, back straight, hands resting gently on his thighs. His fingers twitched like they wanted to move but didn't trust the air. "I'm not supposed to be here," he said. "I assumed. I didn't break in." "Not exactly. The door was open. The boiler guy left it one night and I—" He stopped, shrugged. Clara sat on the edge of an old supply crate. "How long?" "A few weeks." "Anyone else know?" "No one cares enough to look down here." "Fair." He looked up sharply. You're not going to tell them. If I were, she said, I would have done it already. Malik looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once, as if accepting a private contract between them. Why are you hiding? She asked. He hesitated. They think I did something, he said. Did you? No. The word came fast, like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. But his eyes didn't flinch. He believed it. Or needed to. What happened? He looked down again. It was a Thursday night. Me and my boy Dre were coming back from church. Some cop stopped us, said we matched a description. Dre got mouthy, said something slick. The cop shoved him. I stepped between them. His jaw tightened. They said I assaulted him. Clara said nothing. She watched him. I ran, he continued. I knew they wouldn't listen. I'd be just another kid in a jumpsuit before they even read my name. Did your friend get arrested? Yeah, but they let him out. He had a lawyer uncle. I didn't. She nodded slowly. And your parents? Gone. Foster. He looked away. She understood. So you found the piano, she said. He smirked, almost bitterly. It found me. I used to play at my church. Nothing fancy. Just chords, hymns. But it felt like flying sometimes. And now, he touched the keys. Just one, a low G. Now it's survival. Clara watched the way his hand hovered above the keys. Even in fear, it was graceful, measured, musical. I have something, she said. She stood slowly, went back upstairs, and returned 10 minutes later. In her arms was a case, worn leather, one strap half detached. She opened it. Inside a violin, her violin. I haven't played in years, she said, but sometimes you don't forget. Malik stared. Clara lifted it gently, positioned it beneath her chin, drew the bow across the strings. The first note wavered, hesitant, unsure, but the second rang clearer, and the third richer. She played a short phrase, simple, something like a question. Then she stopped. The room held its breath. Clara looked at him. Your turn. Malik stared at her, eyes wide. She didn't say anything more, just left the violin case open at the edge of the bench, and walked back into the dark up the stairs. Behind her, after a long silence, she heard the piano answer. The ritual took form quietly, like the way seasons change while no one is looking. Each night, after lights out, Clara slipped out of her room, past the silent portraits of forgotten residents, and descended into the dark. Her steps were deliberate now, confident. She no longer stopped at the fourth stair, no longer left food or messages. That phase had passed. Now they met face to face. The basement had changed. Slightly. Malik had swept a corner clean and pulled 2 chairs close together side by side, one wooden, one plastic. A lamp with a frayed wire buzzed above them, casting a weak orange halo. The cracked piano still sat lopsided on its concrete legs, and Malik had placed Clara's violin case gently beside it, like a relic from another age. She always arrived with a scarf around her shoulders, the same shawl she wore on stage for decades. Green wool embroidered with small golden threads that shimmered when she moved. Her fingers, though stiff with age, had regained memory. They flexed with purpose, stretching and curling as if tuning the air itself. Malik greeted her each night with a small nod. No more fear in his eyes, not quite trust either, but something forming between them, slow as a blooming thing in winter. They didn't speak much at first. Words got in the way. It was the music that taught them how to breathe together. Malik played like a storm breaking in reverse, jagged, awkward, beautiful in its disarray. He missed notes, fumbled rhythms, but poured himself into every measure. His chords slammed down like verdicts, his transitions stumbled like apology. Clara never corrected him immediately. She let him play the whole thing. Whatever it was, then sat in silence for a few beats before reaching for the violin. She would mirror his melody, then mold it. Shift the key shape, the phrasing soften the edges. Her bow would pull his rawness into coherence, like stitching a torn canvas into something worth keeping. Feel it before you think it, she said one night after Malik flinched at a missed note. But I'm trying, he said, frustrated. That's the problem. You're trying like it's a test. It's not. It's blood. You don't think about bleeding, you just do it. He stared at her, half offended, half in awe. She smirked. Play it again. And this time don't flinch when it hurts. The music got better. Not cleaner, not perfect, but braver. Malik's fingers began to trust the keys. His ear sharpened. He noticed when his left hand lagged behind the right, when his pedal drowned the phrasing. He asked questions, took notes, practiced scales before Clara arrived. One night, Clara pulled a wrinkled sheet of staff paper from her coat pocket. "I've been hearing something," she said, sitting down. "A theme. Kept me up all night." She drew a line of notes, then hummed it low, haunting, unresolved. Malik leaned in, curious. "It wants to go somewhere," she said, "but it's scared." Malik tapped the keys softly, picking out the melody. "What key?" "D minor. But it keeps threatening to modulate. It's not sure who it wants to be." He nodded slowly, then added a descending run beneath it. Clara's eyes lit up. "There," she whispered. "That's the shadow." From that night on, they began building the piece together, one bar at a time. A strange, aching conversation between violin and piano, between age and youth, between silence and survival. They didn't call it a symphony, not at first. It was just the piece. It began as fragments, Clara's mournful motifs, woven through Malik's sharp, rhythmic stabs. It grew crooked like a tree bending toward light through broken glass. Sometimes they argued over timing. Malik wanted dissonance, Clara wanted clarity, but neither of them walked away. Each compromise made the music deeper. Clara began bringing her old metronome. Malik hated it at first, said it made him nervous, but she insisted. "This isn't just noise," she told him. "This is architecture, and tempo is gravity." He rolled his eyes, but he listened. In return, he taught her to loosen the bow tension, to let the melody breathe where it wanted to, not where the rules said it should. He played riffs between their sessions, bits of gospel, old R&B lines. Clara learned to improvise again like she hadn't done since conservatory, when she thought the only thing that mattered was precision. One night, after a particularly electric session, they sat in silence. Clara's fingers were sore. Malik's shirt clung to his back with sweat. "That run you added," she said after the bridge. He nodded. "Too much." "No," she said. "Perfect. It felt like falling off a rooftop and landing on your feet." She chuckled. "Exactly." Malik looked at her for a long time. "I don't know why you're still helping me," he said quietly. "You don't have to." Clara stared down at her violin. The wood had dulled over the years, but in the right light it still glowed. "Maybe I do," she said. He waited. "I spent my life chasing sound," she continued. "Big halls, bright lights. Every night was a performance. But when my husband died and my daughter stopped calling, all that was left was the silence." She looked up at him. "Then you showed up, with your broken piano and your fury, and your soul poured out all over the keys. And for the first time in years, the silence got scared." Malik blinked throat tight. He looked down. "No one's ever said anything like that to me." "Then people have been wasting their breath." He smiled just barely. The symphony continued. They named the movements together. I. Whisper in the pipes. 2. Footsteps at the edge. 3. Concrete waltz. 4. Unfinished light. Each title meant something to them. Each phrase a memory encoded. The bridge section mirrored Clara's childhood in Queens, the melody tracing the lullaby her mother used to hum while folding laundry. Malik added a rhythmic break that pulsed like sirens, a nod to the night he first ran from the cops. They weren't just composing music. They were translating their lives. One night Clara didn't bring her violin. She brought photographs. Malik shuffled through them in awe, black and white prints of Clara on stage at Carnegie Hall, her bow frozen, midair eyes closed in reverence. Newspaper clippings, reviews in cursive fonts. One labeled her the fire between notes. "You were famous," he said. "I was loud," she replied. He looked at her. "What happened?" Clara hesitated. "Time, grief, a world that only remembers you when you're useful." Malik said nothing. Then he reached into his backpack and handed her a folded page, a wanted poster. His name, his face, a description. Clara studied it. "They think I broke a cop's jaw," he said. "I didn't." "I believe you," she said. "You don't even know me." "I know your music." He swallowed hard. Then he pointed to a passage in the second movement. "This part," he said. "It needs more tension, right before the transition." Clara nodded, agreed. That night they rewrote the crescendo, together. And when they played it violin weeping over a piano thunder, it felt like resurrection. Clara, for the first time in decades, wasn't just revisiting music. She was reborn in it, and Malik, who had been invisible to the world above, was no longer hiding. He was becoming. It started with whispers. In places like Rose Hill Haven, nothing stayed secret for long. The residents had sharp eyes dulled by time, but sharpened by boredom, and the staff had schedules built on routine. Anything that didn't fit stood out like a dish left unwashed. Clara's nightly disappearances hadn't gone unnoticed. A week after she and Malik had finalized the second movement, a knock came on Clara's door just before lunch. It wasn't gentle. It was the kind of knock meant to announce suspicion, not curiosity. She opened the door slowly. Nancy, the floor manager, stood there with a clipboard and a pursed lip expression that could curdle cream. "Good morning, Mrs. Monroe. Do you have a moment?" Clara stepped aside silently. Nancy entered with a sweeping glance, taking in the tidy bed, the half-finished crossword puzzle, and the untouched breakfast tray. Her eyes landed on the violin case in the corner. "You've been active lately," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard. "Night walks." Clara said nothing. Nancy looked up. "One of our residents, Mrs. Devlin, mentioned she saw you heading toward the lower stairwell. After hours. Mrs. Devlin also sees her dead husband playing poker in the laundry room," Clara replied dryly. Nancy didn't flinch. "Still, we take security seriously, for everyone's safety." Clara crossed her arms. "Do you patrol every time someone wanders to the vending machine? The basement's off limits. The staff storage area is restricted." And yet Clara said coolly, "The music keeps coming from somewhere." Nancy blinked. "I beg your pardon? I'm just saying." Clara continued walking slowly toward the window. "This building has old bones. Sometimes they sing." Nancy stared at her for a long moment. "We'll be reviewing hallway footage," she said, the warning tucked into her tone like a switchblade. Clara offered her a polite smile. "You'll find hours of riveting footage of me sleeping. Do let me know how it ends." After Nancy left, Clara locked the door behind her, then sat heavily on the bed. It was starting. That night, she took an alternate route through the laundry corridor and down a forgotten service stairwell she'd noticed weeks ago. The paint was chipped and the handrail was loose, but it led to the basement all the same. Malik was already at the piano, head-bent fingers hovering over the keys like a prayer in progress. She didn't speak until she'd caught her breath and double-checked the door. "We've got a problem," she said. He didn't look up. "I figured, you're late. Someone's watching. One of the other residents saw me." Malik stopped playing. What now? Clara moved toward the corner, dragging a crate close. She sat and pulled out the manuscript from her coat. "We move faster." Malik frowned. "You sure that's smart?" "I'm sure I don't have forever," she replied. There was a pause. Then she added, "And I think it's time you told me the rest." Malik was silent. She waited. After a long beat, he said, "It was October. Cold. The kind of cold that stings your teeth." His voice was low-flat, like peeling off a scab carefully. "We were walking back from choir practice, me and Dre. This cop pulled up. Said we fit a description, which, by the way, just means we existed in skin like ours. Dre had weed on him. Not much, but enough to freak out. He mouthed off, said something dumb. The cop grabs him, slams him on the hood. Dre screams. Clara listened, her eyes fixed on his hands. They were clenched now, resting on his thighs. I step in. I grab the cop's wrist, just trying to pull him off, that's all. He spins, elbows me, I fall. Then backup shows up. Dre runs. They get me. He took a breath. They charged me with assault. Said I resisted arrest even though I wasn't being arrested. Said I endangered an officer. Dre didn't say anything. Didn't speak up. His uncle's a lawyer. Told him to shut up and lay low. So he did. And you? I ran, out on bail. Now I'm here, hiding in a haunted basement. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, he said. Then softer. But that doesn't matter. Another pause. Then Clara stood. She reached for her violin and pulled it gently from the case. Her fingers brushed the strings, testing them, remembering. There's a difference, she said, between surviving quietly and being heard. Malik looked up. You've been surviving, she continued, playing in the dark, hoping no one hears. But this, she held up the score, this is worth being heard. You think a song's going to fix what's broken? I think a song can make them listen long enough to see what they broke. He didn't respond. She sat again, rested the violin on her lap. I was 20 when I played my first solo at Lincoln Center, she said. I was the only black woman in the whole damn orchestra. The night before, my teacher told me, don't just play the music, be the thing that shatters the silence. She looked at Malik. You've been playing like someone afraid of silence. It's time to shatter it. He stared at her for a long while. Then quietly, "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she replied, "we finish this symphony, and we play it." He blinked. "Where?" "Somewhere they can't ignore it." "Like where?" Clara smiled. "The gala." Malik's eyes widened. "The fundraiser." She nodded. "Rose Hill's annual donor gala. Next month. Every staff member, board member, even local reporters will be there. They wheel us out to play checkers and pretend we're fulfilled. It's all PR. They'd never let me near it." "They don't have to," Clara said. "We don't ask." He shook his head. "That's crazy." "That's the point." Silence stretched between them. Then Malik stood and walked to the piano. He sat, rested his fingers on the keys. He played the opening bars of the first movement. Not timid, not polished, but ready. Clara lifted the violin to her shoulder, and together in the dark heart of the building, they began to rehearse a rebellion. Clara stood at the edge of the basement, the violin case in her hand, and resolve etched deep into the lines of her face. Malik was already seated at the piano shoulders, tense eyes clouded with fatigue. The rehearsal had stretched past midnight the night before, and now his posture spoke of doubt more than determination. She walked up slowly and placed the case beside him. "We're running out of time," she said. Malik didn't answer right away. He pressed one key, a soft G that hummed into the space like a question. "They'll never let us," he muttered. "You know that." "They don't have to," Clara replied. "We'll just do it." He shook his head. "Clara, this isn't like sneaking down here with sheet music. This is different. That's a whole room full of board members, donors, cops. Then let them listen," she snapped, sharper than intended. He looked up, startled. She softened. "This isn't about showing off," she said. "It's about saying something, about not letting them speak for you anymore." He stared at her, breathing quietly through his nose. "I don't want to get you in trouble." Clara's lips twitched. "I've lived through worse," she said. "And I'm not scared of being escorted out of some fundraiser in orthopedic shoes." That made him laugh, not loudly, but enough. He leaned back and looked at her for a long moment. "You really think they'll stop and listen to us?" She opened the violin case and pulled the instrument gently from its cradle. "No," she said, "but they'll never forget it." The rehearsals changed. They became less playful, less improvisational. Now every second counted. Clara ran scales with Malik like a drill sergeant, sharp, insistent, relentless. She adjusted his phrasing with the flick of a brow, stopped him mid-chord to correct fingering. She dissected the second movement until he could feel its time signature in his breath. Malik, for all his doubts, responded. He stayed late, practiced until his hands ached, scribbled notes into the margins of their score like a man cramming for Judgment Day. But he was scared. Clara could see it in his body, how his shoulders rose higher with each passing day, how his fingers started trembling after an hour of playing. He flinched at any unfamiliar sound from the hallway above. "They'll find me," he whispered one night, pacing the floor like a hunted animal. "You don't know what they'll do if I show up in that room." Clara sat quietly on a crate, her violin resting in her lap. "They'll listen," she said, "even if it's only for 3 minutes. That's all we need." 3 minutes could get me killed. She stood, walked over to him, took both his wrists in her frail, veiny hands. 3 minutes, she said, could save your whole damn life. But they weren't alone anymore. Nancy, the floor manager, had started watching Clara more closely. Her visits to Clara's room increased, always polite, always laced with quiet suspicion. "We've installed a new camera system," Nancy announced one morning, her voice sweet as arsenic. "For your safety, of course. The old blind spots are all covered now." Clara nodded, unmoved. "That's wonderful," she said. "Now you can record how little happens in this place." But she felt the pressure tightening. That night, as she turned the corner into the stairwell, she caught the red blink of a new camera mounted near the storage hallway. Her heart sank. When she reached the basement, she told Malik, "We have to move." He looked up from the keys. "Move where?" "There's another room, second floor, back wing, an old storage closet they never use." "Won't they hear us?" "Only if we let them." The second-floor storage room smelled of mothballs and industrial dust. It had no lights except for a broken fluorescent flickering in the hallway just outside. Clara brought 2 small LED lanterns and set them on opposite shelves, casting dim yellow circles across the floor. The piano couldn't come with them. but Malik found an old electric keyboard buried under plastic tarps. Half the keys stuck and the volume knob didn't work, but it could play. They called it the bunker. It became their new sanctuary. Clara dragged in a folding chair. Malik claimed a milk crate. They spread their sheet music across the floor and marked it with red and blue pens. Clara brought hot tea in thermoses. Malik brought an old speaker that buzzed faintly like static prayers. They practiced harder, more deliberately, and in that flickering half-light a strange and sacred bond formed not just of music, but of something closer to family. Malik started calling her Miss Clara in moments of frustration, which made her laugh. "I haven't been called Miss anything since Carter was president," she told him once. "You act like a general," he replied. "Then play like a soldier." Sometimes during breaks they talked, about everything and nothing. She told him about her husband, how he used to fall asleep during her rehearsals, but still called her his favorite sound. About her daughter Lena, who used to sleep curled at Clara's feet during tour stops until ambition replaced lullabies with spreadsheets. Malik opened up too, slowly, carefully. He told her about the foster homes, the good one in Yonkers with a piano, the bad one in Queens with locked cabinets and cold spaghetti. He told her about the church that taught him harmony and the street that taught him how to disappear. One night, after a perfect run-through of the third movement, Clara looked over at him with something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "You know," she said, "I never had a grandson." He blinked. "Oh," he said, "well, I never had a grandmother." Clara raised an eyebrow. Pity. For who? She smiled. They went back to rehearsing. But after that night, something subtle changed. When Clara handed Malik a new marked-up score, he didn't just nod, he read it carefully, like it mattered. When he played a passage right, she tapped his knee like a proud conductor. When she coughed, he handed her tea before she asked. They weren't just teacher and student anymore. They were a unit. Two halves of a broken instrument somehow making music again. And they had a deadline, a date, a stage. Everything was building toward it. One shot. 3 minutes. And a room full of people who didn't know they were about to hear the sound of defiance of survival of two strangers who had found a kind of family in the quietest place imaginable. The only question now was whether they'd make it to the end of the song. It happened on a Wednesday morning right after breakfast, just as Clara was returning from the chapel where she pretended to pray, but actually went to rehearse fingering in silence. The air in Rose Hill felt different, tense, braced for something. She felt it first in the way the nurse at the front desk avoided her eyes. Then in the way a security guard she'd never seen before brushed past her in the hallway with a radio clipped to his shoulder. When she reached her room, there was a printed notice slipped under the door. Facility Safety Inspection, floor-by-floor clearance, beginning at 11:00 a.m. Please remain in your assigned units until further notice. Her stomach dropped. She glanced at the clock. 10:07. Without thinking, she grabbed her cardigan, shoved her feet into her soft orthopedic flats, and hurried down the hall, avoiding every camera, every open doorway. She kept her head down posture slow but purposeful, like any old woman heading toward the restroom. She cut behind the laundry cart, slipped past the recreation room, and made her way up to the second-floor storage wing. The hallway was empty, but the door to the rehearsal room was slightly ajar. Inside, Malik was leaning over the keyboard, headphones pressed tight against his ears. She burst in. He jumped, pulling the headphones off. "Clara." "Pack it up," she hissed. "Now." "What?" "They're sweeping the building, top to bottom, security, new people. This isn't a fire drill." He froze, then moved. In an instant, he powered off the keyboard, stuffed their music sheets into the backpack, yanked his hoodie over his head, and paused. "Where?" "Downstairs. Supply closet off the east wing, the one behind the linen chute." He nodded. They moved fast. Two ghosts rehearsed in vanishing. Malik disappeared down the service elevator Clara had shown him 2 weeks ago while she took the main hallway acting casual, humming an old tune under her breath. As she turned the corner, she heard the voices. "Said someone saw movement on the second-floor storage cam. We're pulling all feeds now." It was Nancy. Clara's pulse surged. She could hear heavy steps approaching from behind. She needed a diversion, and she needed it now. She passed the janitor's closet where a yellow wet floor sign leaned against the wall. She grabbed it, then let herself fall. Not gently, not dramatically. Hard. Her hip hit the floor with a sick, solid thump, and a shout tore from her throat. Within seconds, people came running. Nurses, security. "Oh my God, Mrs. Monroe." I told you this corner was slippery. Why the hell isn't that mop water cleaned up? Her voice cracked righteous and sharp. Someone knelt beside her. Don't move, ma'am. Just hold still. We're calling a medic. No need, she gritted. I just need to sit up. Damn linoleum. They surrounded her, offered ice packs, measured her blood pressure. No one looked at the camera feeds for a full 20 minutes. It was enough. That night, Clara lay in bed with a wrapped ankle and an ice pack pressed to her hip. She'd told the attending nurse she didn't need the ER, just a few aspirin and peace. When the hallway cleared, she pulled the rotary phone close. From a drawer in her nightstand, she dug out a battered leather address book, creases worn into the pages from years of disuse. She turned to the M's, Marion Blake. She hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. Last she heard, he'd retired to Vermont, grew tomatoes, and argued with the local council over zoning laws. She dialed. 3 rings, then hello. The voice was unmistakable, deep theatrical and permanently amused. It's me, Clara said. A pause. Then, good God. Clara Monroe. I need a favor. You always do. The next day, Marion arrived unannounced at Rose Hill in a tan trench coat, a canvas briefcase, and with an energy that did not match his 72 years. He hugged her gently in the lounge, then sat across from her in a quiet corner with a legal pad and a fountain pen. I don't even get a "how have you been," he teased. Not this time, Clara replied. There's a boy. He raised an eyebrow. He's 17. His name is Malik. He's in hiding, wrongly accused of assaulting an officer. The real story's messier, but I believe him. You always believe the underdog. This time it matters. She told him everything. The night they met, the music, the symphony, the plan, and the poster. Marion listened intently, his fingers steepled under his chin. When she finished, he leaned back and nodded slowly. Assault on an officer, he muttered. Felony. Likely carried out by a grand jury. And he ran, because no one would believe him. Marion sighed. Do you have any case documents? Clara reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a photocopy of the arrest warrant she'd found in Malik's backpack. Marion took it, scanned it quickly, then looked up. I can check the docket, maybe find out if there were procedural errors, any missing reports. More than that, Clara said. Find the truth. 3 days later, he called. She picked up on the first ring. It stinks, he said. How bad? Bad. The arresting officer has a record 3 prior complaints of excessive force, all buried. The witness statement from Malik's friend, it's missing. The surveillance footage from the night inconclusive, conveniently. She sat up straighter. What about the boy Dre, living with his uncle in Yonkers? I found him. The kid's scared to death, said he was told to shut his mouth or his uncle's firm would drop him. Will he talk? Marion was quiet for a moment. Maybe, with the right push. Clara exhaled. This boy, she said, he doesn't need a lawyer. He needs a megaphone. Well, Marion replied, it sounds like you're about to hand him a stage. Help me, she said. Not just to clear his name. Help me give him the ending he deserves. Marion paused. Then send me the music. I want to know what truth sounds like. Back at Rose Hill, the staff buzzed about Clara's fall. Nancy hovered near her room more often, suddenly attentive and helpful, offering tea, suggesting puzzle books, reminding her gently not to strain herself. Clara smiled through every encounter, thanked her for the concern, and limped to dinner like nothing was brewing. But beneath that calm, something electric was building. Malik stayed hidden, rehearsing quietly in a back janitor's closet Marion had discreetly unlocked for them with a skeleton key and a wink. Each note they played now was more than music. It was evidence of life, of resistance, of truth fighting its way back into light. And time was running out. The ballroom at Rose Hill Haven had never looked so pristine. Round tables draped in white linen circled a small raised stage at the front. Strings of warm lights hung overhead like soft constellations. Servers in black ties moved quietly between tables with trays of sparkling cider and delicate hors d'oeuvres. A jazz trio in the corner filled the air with polite, forgettable ambiance. This was the night the board dreamed of all year, the annual Rose Hill Gala fundraiser, when the donors arrived in pearls and cufflinks to remind themselves that charity was beautiful. News cameras were set up along the back wall, capturing footage for local networks. Phrases like honoring dignity in aging and community legacy floated through the conversations like expensive perfume. At the far end of the room, Clara Monroe sat at a reserved table near the stage, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a navy blue gown with pearl buttons and a faint shimmer woven through the fabric, an old performance dress untouched since her last public recital decades ago. Her silver hair was swept into a low chignon, and in front of her, resting against the tablecloth like a sacred object, sat her violin case. She glanced at the wall clock. 7:03 p.m. They were almost out of time. Nancy stepped up to the podium, smiling broadly into the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," she chirped. "On behalf of Rose Hill Haven, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate the work we do and the lives we support. With your generosity, we continue to offer not just care, but community." Polite applause followed. "We have a lovely evening ahead," she continued. "Dinner, of course, a few words from our board members, and a special performance from one of our very own Mrs. Clara Monroe." Clara stood before the applause could start. She moved slowly but deliberately to the stage, her back straight, her fingers curled around the handle of her violin case like a general carrying a war flag. Nancy tried to intercept her with a rehearsed introduction, but Clara leaned gently into the mic and took control. "Thank you, Nancy," she said. "I'll take it from here." There was an awkward pause. Clara stepped into the spotlight, the room dimming around her. She looked out across the crowd faces she didn't know. Board members she'd nodded to in elevators. Reporters she'd once brushed shoulders with during another life. "I know what this night is supposed to be," she said. "Gratitude, celebration, comfortable speeches and polite applause." Soft laughter rippled from the audience. "But tonight I want to offer something different." She placed the violin case on a stool beside her and opened it. The soft snap of the latches seemed to echo in the room. Slowly she lifted the instrument, placed it beneath her chin, and let the bow hover in the air for a long breath. "I've written a new piece," she said. "It's called The Symphony from Beneath, or as I like to call it, the Underground Symphony." Whispers stirred. Someone from the back called out, "We didn't see that on the program." "No," Clara replied calmly, "because no one asked what I still had left to say." She stepped aside slightly, nodding toward the side curtain, and then Malik stepped out. Gasps rippled through the room. He was dressed in black slacks, a white shirt slightly too large at the cuffs, and a borrowed vest from the Rose Hill thrift bin. His hands trembled at his sides, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscle flickered near his ear. One camera shifted toward him. A few guests leaned back in confusion. Nancy stepped forward, mouth open, but Clara blocked her with a single look. "This," Clara said, voice firm, "is my accompanist, my co-composer." Whispers turned into murmurs. Somewhere near the front, a donor's brow furrowed. A security guard at the edge of the room placed a hand on his radio. Malik stepped to the baby grand piano wheeled in that afternoon under the pretense of a solo recital and sat down. He didn't look up. Clara turned to face him. "You ready?" she asked softly. He nodded once, and they began. The first note sliced the silence like a blade. Violin and piano trembling in unison, delicate, ghost-like. The melody was spare at first, like something lost underwater. Malik's fingers struck the keys with careful pressure, the rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat, trying to steady itself. Clara followed her bow, drifting gently across the strings, the tone breathy, uncertain, as if waking from sleep. Then the piece shifted. The second movement broke open like a wound. Clara leaned into her playing, now no longer careful. Fierce, raw. Her eyes closed, her fingers flying over the strings with a force that came not from muscle but memory. The melody lifted into chaos, urgent, broken, defiant. Malik's chords deepened. He pounded the low notes like a march, then softened, slid into a minor key, weaving in snippets of gospel-broken harmonies. Dissonance layered like bricks in a wall. The room had gone still. No clinking silverware, no murmuring. Just listening. Clara moved closer to the front of the stage as the third movement swelled. Her sound grew lighter, wistful, filled with the ache of something almost lost, but not quite. Malik mirrored her with delicate arpeggios that shimmered like light caught on broken glass. Then came the final crescendo. A surge, a storm, a sound that didn't ask for permission but took its place loudly and unapologetically. Clara pulled everything from the strings. Pain, longing, rebellion, hope. Malik pushed into the final chords like he was pushing back at the world itself. And then silence. Not awkward, not forced, reverent. Clara lowered her bow. Malik's hands hovered over the keys for just a second longer, as if unsure if he was really finished. Then he looked up. The entire room stared back, not blinking, not breathing, until applause. It started slowly. One donor, then another, then someone from the kitchen. Then the room erupted. Some stood, some clapped with confusion still in their eyes, but they clapped nonetheless. Clara turned to Malik and smiled, not politely, proudly.